Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Fall Apart, Collect the Pieces. This will be part 16, chapters 25 and 26. Chapter 25. He stepped around Katsuki and approached his desk slowly, eyes wide and watery. Laid out in a pretty display, among his pens and paperwork was a vintage All Might action figure set. It was nearly complete, only one item missing. He was perplexed by its presence. He hadn't owned any of these before the defilement of his merch room, but he recognized the collection it was from. It must have cost a fortune. There was a note alongside it, and he picked it up, flipping the card open and reading with bated breath. Izuku, I'm glad that the media is turning back in your favor. I'm still sorry for the part I played in this mess. I hope you'll accept these as part of my apology. I've been hunting them down since I realized the truth. I was debating whether or not to give you the incomplete set when I saw Ochako's press conference. I figured you could use a pick-me-up. I know the Mite-mobile is missing. Part of me is hoping that we'll be able to find the original one I got for you, but I'm still not sure what you want to do. It goes without saying, but I'm more than willing to help you hunt down the things that were taken from you. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. Shoto. His heart ached from how full it felt. He passed the note to Kachan, who had been lingering beside him with his palm outstretched. He was almost reluctant to handle any of it, because his eyes were leaking like open faucets, and he didn't want to damage the boxes with his tears. He couldn't help it, though. It was so thoughtful, and spoke volumes to how much his friend cared. He picked up the smallest box reverently, turning it over in his hands. Shoto must have spent every available minute he had looking for these. They weren't particularly popular, focusing more on David Shield's support work than All Might himself. Only die-hard collectors wanted them, and they must have been damn hard to get a hold of. Damn, Katsuki murmured, placing the card back on the desk, unusually gentle. Idiot went all out. This is so sweet, Izuku sobbed, clutching the replica impact gauntlets to his chest. How did he even find these? Crybaby, Katsuki muttered, ruffling his hair. Put the nerd shit down before you hurt it. Gently he tugged the box out of Izuku's grip, examining it with a vague air of worship before placing it back on the desk. Sounds like he actually gets where he fucked up. It did sound like that, and he was happy and relieved and grateful that Shoto had reached out. After the last time they spoke, he hadn't been sure how to bridge the gap between them, especially since he was still so hurt. It wasn't fair, because Shoto had been hurt too. Ochako had lied to him, and broken his trust, so that he'd break Izuku's trust. It was all so insidious, and he didn't know how to make either of them feel better. Maybe the answer to that was just learning from mistakes, communicating better, and moving forward. He hoped that was the lesson learned, because he missed Shoto. It was hard not having him around. Let me guess, Katsuki sighed. You're gonna invite Princess Peppermint to dinner or something, and I'm gonna be subjected to a play-by-play of Yumi's love life while I try to eat my ramen in peace. Izuku choked on a wet laugh. You don't have to come over, you know. Katsuki shrugged. Don't have anything better to do. Besides, you'll mope if I'm not there. Don't deny it. Wet and Wild snitched on you. Izuku punched his arm half-heartedly. Stop calling Koda Wet and Wild. It's gross. It's accurate. Still gross. He hadn't spent a single night alone since his divorce. The friends he still trusted, the ones who had his back, had essentially colonized his home. He'd barely had a waking minute to dwell on the sheer shittiness of his situation, unless the situation was right in front of him. Katsuki had basically moved in. So what if he'd been a little down when he wasn't around? It was so cool to have so much time with his best friend, even if the reason he was around so much was terrible. Seriously, though, Katsuki said, bringing his attention back. If you're still iffy about having icy thought in your space, you can take your time. He shook his head. No, it's okay. I want him there, just with buffers for now. Katsuki eyed him warily, even as he patted at Izuku's wet cheeks with his sleeves. How many buffers? Knowing that Katsuki would protest, he looked up at his partner with wide, watery eyes, sticking his bottom lip out for maximum impact. Katsuki sighed, rolling his eyes. All of them. Fuck. Fine. Whatever. I'm gonna get my concussive earplugs, though. I don't want to hear Pinky screeching her dumbass head off about Cheek's press conference. Izuku tilted his head. You think she and A are up for it? Eijiro's injuries were significantly better, but the amount of healing it took meant that his stamina was at an all-time low, not to mention his range of motion was severely limited. and Mina had been spending all her free time helping him with pain management and recovery. Pretty sure they're getting sick of each other, Katsuki huffed. In that gross, affectionate way, though. He's so fucking stupid, Cats. I just want to make out, but he keeps moving his shoulder weird, he mimicked in a high falsetto. Then he pitched it extra low to mock Eijiro. She keeps tying my goddamn shoelaces. This is so not manly. Izuku laughed, still wet and tremulous. He leaned his head on Katsuki's chest, shoulders shaking with mirth. Well, I'd love to see them if they want to join us. Denki and Hitoshi were already planning on coming over, so you just have to invite them and Hanta. What about the brats? Katsuki asked, resting his chin atop Izuku's head. They're back in school, he said. Might be a pain to get them off campus. Besides, if things are tense, I want to leave them out of it, you know? He really wanted things to get better with Shoto. He was making an effort and being so thoughtful, and Izuku missed him. That didn't change the fact that he had helped Ochako screw Izuku over, whether or not he knew what he was doing, and, some of their friends were pretty intent on holding grudges. Mina was particularly zealous about her vendetta, and honestly, Izuku couldn't blame her. Ei had almost died. If anything had happened to Katsuki, he would have ended up in jail for what he did to them, so he could only imagine how she felt. You should probably tell Mina that we're inviting Sho, he said, pulling back. Katsuki nodded, slinging an arm around Izuku's shoulders. Sure, he agreed. I think she's waiting to ambush Robocop, though. I don't think Icy-Hot has to worry. Now, he said, gesturing to the desk. Izuku paused at the mention of Ida. He wondered if he felt any remorse at all, now that the whole story was out. It didn't really matter, he supposed. He'd still jumped to conclusions and thrown their friendship out the window. You want to take this shit home or leave it here? Katsuki asked, regaining his attention. Izuku bit his lip. On the one hand, he wanted to literally hold it as he fell asleep at night, cuddling up close to the thoughtful gesture Shoto had made. On the other hand, he was going to move eventually. Stuff got damaged in moves, and he didn't want to pollute the gift with the vibe of his merch room. He'd even opted to put All Might's signature in his bedroom instead. It was probably stupid, but that space had a mental block that he just couldn't get past. I think I should leave it here for now, he admitted, sounding noticeably less cheerful. Katsuki shot him a concerned glance. It just makes sense for now, he deflected. Katsuki didn't look like he bought it, but he didn't pry. He probably didn't need to. Kachan knew him better than he knew himself. Fine, he replied. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about something, he said, steering Izuku to his desk chair and pushing him into it. He scrubbed at Izuku's face again, with his sleeve, cleaning him up as best he could before leaning against the desk itself and crossing his arms. There was an intervention-y vibe to him that made Izuku's anxiety spike. What? He huffed. The blonde was just staring at him, and it was making him nervous. I don't want to push it, all right? I know you were pretty against it at the start, he began, tensing as though he was preparing for a fight. I think you should press charges against Cheeks. Izuku raised his eyebrows. I was already planning on... You were going to go after her for the shit that endangered the public, Katsuki interrupted, once again knowing what Izuku would do before he did it. Breach of contract, reckless negligence, bullshit like that, right? That's the plan, yeah? Izuku replied hesitantly. Katsuki took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. I know it's not in your nature to defend yourself, but fuck Deku. She's made your life hell. She almost ruined your career. Couldn't work because civilians didn't trust you, and that's completely fucked. She knew what she was doing, all right? She went out of her way to paint you as the bad guy. Not just that, she wanted to make you look dangerously irresponsible and immature. She tried to ruin you. Not only that, she stole your shit. I know you don't want to drag this shit out, but she seriously fucked you over. Izuku sighed, tilting his head back. What good would it do, Kachan? He asked. I'm going after the important stuff, mostly to make sure she faces the consequences of her actions. The rest of it would look petty, childish. You saw how they reacted. That's how they reacted when they didn't know shit about what was going on, Katsuki argued. And now we don't have to hold back for the commission, so Hana can find a way to spin it no matter what that bitch says. Come on, he wheedled. It's the age-old shit you've always done. You're teaching people that the only time they can stick up for themselves and get fucking justice is if it's for some sort of greater good. It's not enough that you're personally hurt. It only counts if others are hurt too. That's a shit message, Deku. Izuku frowned. Is that really... Huh. He stopped to think, the gears in his head jamming like they were clogged with drying glue. Is that the message it's sending? I thought... Yeah, the personal stuff hurts, But I'm more worried about keeping people safe. We all fucking know that. You're allowed to do both, though. Defending yourself and the public aren't mutually exclusive. You don't have to pick. Izuku stared at him. It'll mean months of trials and ugly media tactics, and you know what scandal does to rankings. It's already taken a major hit. Do you really want to keep that going? We're the fucking best, Kacchan snapped. We can do anything, goddammit. So what if we take a hit and our rankings tank for a while? We'll climb back up. You're not a fucking doormat. You're the strongest and kindest person I know. Show people that they can be both. Show people that you can be both. Izuku looked at the boxes on his desk. 5 thoughtfully curated gifts to start replacing a collection of hundreds. He wondered if the first All Might poster his mom ever got him was crumpled under heaps of trash in a landfill. He wondered if Denki's gift, the pristine Titan Star lunchbox, had been dented and damaged in a donation bin. Had it even made it into a donation bin, or had it been trashed? Was the aluminum rusted beyond repair so that the veritable monument to his friendship with the electric blonde was rendered useless and decayed? They'd meant something to him. Maybe it wasn't world-ending or life-threatening, but it had been important. Kacchan was right. She had stolen from him. She'd defamed him. It felt petty, but he wanted her to answer for it. It wouldn't be immature, he asked. Not the theft stuff. That makes sense, but defamation? My reputation doesn't mean that much to me, as long as I can get the job done. But you couldn't, he snapped. She painted such a shitty picture of you that even other fucking heroes were treating you like shit on the job. That alone could have gotten someone killed, possibly even you. Hell, it opened the door to a false, excessive force report. It's not petty at all. If you don't do it, you're basically sending a message that people can pull shit like this and get away with it because it's no big deal, but it is. What if Kiko had died because the Puritan plant decided not to take you seriously? Izuku swallowed thickly, pit forming in his stomach. God, it was almost too awful to imagine. As bad as it had turned out, it could have been way worse. He hadn't let himself dwell on that, because what-ifs were torture in their line of work. Yeah, okay, he replied, voice tight with emotion. You've made your point. Katsuki sighed, leaning forward and placing broad, warm hands on Izuku's shoulders. I don't want to freak you out, or make shit hard, he said. I just want you to take yourself into account. You always let people slide for being awful, and it sucks. You deserve better, so fucking treat yourself better. Izuku nodded, relaxing under the comforting weight of Kacchan's palms. He could do that. At least, he could try. Chapter 26. Izuku was leaned against Kacchan on the couch, listening in a daze as Mr. Fujiwara listed off all the different ways Izuku could pursue legal action against his ex-wife. It still felt unbelievable that they'd only been married for 2 months before everything in his life had gone to absolute shit. Everything except the friends he could count on, of course. As hurtful as the reveal had been, he supposed it was good that he'd learned who to trust, that he'd learned who was truly in his corner. Some people didn't learn that until it was too late. He felt Katsuki's voice against his side as the blonde asked questions, bringing him back to the conversation. Does he have grounds to sue her for the total value of the collection? Katsuki asked. Izuku pursed his lips. Since she only profited off of a portion of it. He should, Fujiwara assured them. Regardless of the profit she made, she still stole the items in question. They were well documented and insured, so you should have the proverbial high ground. And defamation? Katsuki pushed. Will be significantly easier as long as we go about it correctly, he said. It helps that Deku was so adamant about not causing a scandal in the beginning. Defamation suits are about public image, whether or not it's fair. He was dragged through the mud when he tried to take the high ground. That'll count for something. Something inside him twisted, still uncomfortable with the idea of something that seemed so petty, but his image was tied to his ability to do his job, as was made evidently clear. She had nearly ruined him. Thankfully, the commission had been on his side, along with his friends. He was allowed to look out for himself. He was. It ran like a mantra in his head, in a voice that sounded suspiciously like Kacchan's. Is there anything else you need from us to get started? He asked quietly. I think I have enough to get the ball rolling, Fujiwara said. I'd been hoping you'd pursue this course of action, so I've been preparing. More for theft than for defamation, but it's not too heavy a lift. He wasn't sure if Fujiwara wanted that because it was a good idea, or simply because the man enjoyed suing people. Both were possible. How fast can we get it over with? Katsuki asked, his arm draped over Izuku's shoulders in a show of comfort, the warm weight reassuring and grounding. He's been through enough shit already. The faster we can wash our hands of that bitch, the better. Fujiwara sighed. Unfortunately, lawsuits are ugly. They take time. We might be able to speed it up, considering how many people are going after her. They'll want to get everything involving Aravati out of the way as fast as possible. That still could mean months of drawn-out legal proceedings. Well, that was disheartening. Katsuki squeezed his shoulder in quiet support, keeping unnecessary tension out of his body. Whether it took months or years, at least he knew Kanchan would support him through it. All of their friends would. Someone knocked on the door, and Izuku glanced at the clock. It looked like someone had shown up early for their get-together. It also looked like this meeting had gone on for an hour longer than they'd hoped. Whatever it takes. Izuku sighed as Katsuki unwound himself from around his shoulders, getting up to answer the door. As long as it's done tactfully. I don't want to come off as spiteful. Shouldn't be a problem, Fujiwara chuckled, still scribbling on his legal pad. You're not. You're the least spiteful ex-husband I've ever met in my life. You ever watched that ancient-ass comedian, Jim Mahoney or something? Katsuki asked as he shuffled toward the entrance. You could probably spill soup on his lap and he'd apologize to you. Fuck you too, Izuku grumbled, scowling at Katsuki's cackle. And it's John Mulaney, you uncultured swine. Fujiwara chuckled at them, amused despite the gravity of the situation. Well, this time, he said, still laughing. You won't be apologizing for the soup, he promised. And we'll get the soup spiller to pay for dry cleaning. Izuku snorted. I appreciate your commitment, both to your business and to the metaphor. Much obliged, he replied, smiling easily. It's not just my business, though. I've represented a lot of heroes, Deku. You're one of the best, not just because of your win-loss ratio or save rate. Izuku flushed. Mr. Fujiwara. You didn't deserve what happened to you, he insisted. And it was disheartening to think that you wouldn't pursue justice for yourself. I'd never tell you to push farther than you wanted. There's a conflict of interest there. But I'm glad that you're pursuing this. I'll make sure you get what you deserve out of this. And so will she. And I'll do it with class, since you asked so nicely. Izuku cracked a tiny grin, flattered and amused. I appreciate that. Let me know if I can help at all. Both of them startled, turning to face Shoto. Katsuki plopped down in his seat, returning his arm to its resting place and schooling his face into a neutral facade. Todoroki, Fujiwara greeted him, genuinely pleased to see him. It's good to see you. Thanks for referring me. You were requested, Shoto corrected. In any case, I'm glad to be here, and I'm here because of you, he shrugged. And I'd be happy for any help you can provide. I have texts from Uraraka leading up to the incident, he offered. They're clearly misleading, and they misrepresent the conversations they had and Izuku's willingness to part with his belongings, and what she was planning to do with those belongings. Ida and Tsuyu should have similar conversations saved. We might be able to subpoena those, Fujiwara murmured. Thank you. If you could forward screenshots to me, that would be great. If we need official records, I'll forward you consent forms. Shoto nodded, shifting on his feet. To the average bystander, he would have looked a little bit stiff, but not much more than usual. Izuku knew him better. Shoto was on edge. He had no idea how he was going to be received, and he didn't know what to say, or if what he was saying was making things better or worse. Have a seat, Sho, Izuku said, smiling softly. We're just wrapping up. Can I get you a drink or anything? I'm fine, he said, lowering himself into the armchair. Fujiwara stood. It sounds like you three have some talking to do, he said. And I've got to get started. I'll file the necessary paperwork and make sure she's served within 48 hours. If I need anything, I'll reach out. His strangely benevolent lawyer left with a comforting air of optimism. Alas, he left an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Izuku and Shoto stared at each other, completely unsure of what to say next. Katsuki didn't say anything either, but Izuku suspected that he just wanted to watch Shoto squirm. He had always taken joy in people's discomfort. How are you doing? Shoto asked, clearly deciding that awkward small talk was better than awkward silence. We haven't talked since... Yeah, he replied. I'm better. It's been hard, but I've been working through it, and I've had lots of help and support, and it's been hard to find time to be only sad with all the god-awful bullshit that's been going on. He chuckled humorlessly. Shoto nodded, looking pained. I'm glad you're doing better. And thank you, by the way," Izuku said, smiling a little brighter. "For the merch set. I loved it. You must have spent a ton of time hunting them down, too. It means a lot." Shoto looked down at his hands, where they lay in his lap. "I was really frustrated," he began. "I was so upset by everything that happened, and I was angry at Ochako. I felt violated. And I couldn't help but think that if it was this bad for me, it must have been 1,000 times worse for you. I was basically just moping. Momo showed up for our monthly lunch, and she saw the state I was in, and she snapped me out of it. She told me that if I was so bothered, I should actually do something about it. I wasn't sure what I could do about Ochako without overstepping or making things worse for you, but I figured if you couldn't do something about Kirby, you could do something about the collection." Katsuki finished, face still expressionless. Shoto nodded, still not looking up at them. "I really appreciate it, Sho," Izuku said softly. "I'm touched." Shoto looked up then, glancing around. Izuku knew what he wanted to ask, and so did Kachan. "They're not here," the blonde grunted. Shoto looked at them, tilting his head in confusion. "I left them at the agency," Izuku explained. "Just for now, it doesn't feel safe here." Shoto flinched, looking back down at his lap. He looked wounded, and Izuku hadn't meant for him to feel bad. "I'm looking for a new place anyway," he blurted out. "That stalker kid posted photos of this place online, and it's just not private enough anymore. I don't want your gifts to get damaged in the move, you know." "I'm sorry," Shoto uttered. His voice sounded thin and wavering, and Izuku's heart bled for him. "I'm sorry you don't feel secure here. That's at least partially my fault." "You didn't know?" "I could have known, if I'd asked," he insisted. "If I'd taken a moment to check, if I'd taken the trouble to see what she actually did with your stuff." "It hurt that you didn't ask me, sure, but you had no reason not to trust her," Izuku argued. "She told you we'd compromised, and you thought we'd found a middle ground. Couples do that all the time. You didn't know she'd gone behind my back, and you know better now." "It's not enough," Shoto sighed, looking up at him. "You know that, right? You don't feel secure in your own home." "That's more on Ochako than on you," Izuku offered. It was, at least in part, Shoto's fault too, in the grand scheme of things, though his role was negligible. He'd been trying to help his friends find middle ground. He hadn't realized that Ochako was trying to change him, mold him into her version of the perfect husband in her perfect life, no matter how much it hurt him. And now, he was doing his best to help him heal, first by giving him the space he needed, then by trying to rebuild him. The effort was seen and appreciated. "Really, Sho, I forgive you. I don't really trust you yet, but I see you trying. That matters," he promised. His smile was small but warm, and he hoped that it reassured his heterochromatic friend. "Stop feeling sorry for yourself, dipshit," Katsuki growled. Izuku elbowed him, but he ignored it, save a tiny grunt of discomfort. "You fucked up, and now you're fixing it. What good does feeling guilty do? Suck it the fuck up and be better." While Izuku didn't exactly agree with the delivery, he couldn't argue with Kachan's results. Despite how harshly his rebuke landed, it still seemed to straighten Shoto's spine, lifting a weight off his shoulders. "I really hope we can find the mite-mobile you gave me," Izuku said. "We're working on tracking down the collectors that Ochako sold to. She gave a lot of stuff away, though, so there's no real way to know where that stuff went. The support gear set isn't exactly at the top of the auction site result pages, you know." Shoto nodded. "I definitely know," he sighed. "Especially since it was a limited run. The collectors I talked to said that it was a huge underperformer in its release year." That was true. They'd overproduced the first run, and it had barely moved any units. They canceled future production, and the toys sat on clearance shelves for months. Of those, the Mite-Mobile was the most popular, because the masses had seen it in action. Nobody believed that All Might had used support gauntlets, so nobody wanted them in their collections. Most people assumed it had been a marketing ploy for little kids. Put these on and be strong like All Might. But Izuku had seen the blueprints. The real gauntlets absorbed impact like nobody's business. His stomach twisted again. There was no way Ochako had gotten a price reference off of eBay for the support gear blueprints. They were one of a kind, from the desk of David Shield himself. They were probably at a recycling facility being turned into recycled copy paper. The thought that Mr. Shield and All Might had trusted him with something so special just for it to end up destroyed made his heart bleed. "Any way I can help, let me know," Shoto said, interrupting his train of thought. Izuku gave him a tremulous smile. Katsuki tensed next to him, just for a moment. Izuku looked up at him, brow furrowed, and the blonde squeezed his shoulder in reply, reassuring and warm. "Maybe," Katsuki said, chewing his words thoughtfully. "You might have seen some of his original collection while you were hunting that set down." Shoto nodded slowly. "That's definitely possible," he agreed. "It's not like I know exactly what Izuku had in his arsenal." "Want to go grab your laptop, nerd?" Katsuki asked, shifting his arm to rustle Izuku's hair, petting through the curls like he was petting a cat. "Yeah, sure," Izuku said, reluctantly peeling himself away from Katsuki's side. "I'll be right back." There was a curious look on Katan's face, and Izuku paused as he tried to read it. If Izuku didn't know any better, his hero partner was plotting something. Katan smirked at him. It was his affectionate, comforting smirk, reserved exclusively for him. Izuku couldn't help but feel unfathomably fortunate at the sight of it. Made him feel all fluttery, soft and safe. "The fuck are you waiting for, dork?" he huffed a moment later, nudging at Izuku's leg with his foot. Shaking his head, amused smile curling his lips, Izuku trudged toward his bedroom. All right, listeners. This concludes Chapter 26 of Fall Apart, Collect the Pieces. Chapter 27 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying it. As always, thank you so much for listening.